Food is our most basic right, yet over 20 million Americans lack access to inexpensive, nutritious foods.
In 2020, according to the USDA, about 700,000 people, including almost 200,000 children in New Jersey, were food insecure.
This means they live in a household where they lack consistent access to adequate food that is needed to live healthy, active lives.
If we break it down even further, according to the 2021 study conducted by the Food Research and Action Center, 14% of black households and 18% of Latino households in New Jersey experience food insufficiency compared to 5% of white households.
This year, on Social with a Side of Justice, our goal is to bring awareness to this issue and highlight those individuals and organizations who are taking action to fight against this injustice.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Social with a Side of Justice. I'm Sarah.
I'm Annie.
And I'm Juliana, and we will be your host today.
Today, we will be joined by Janelle Garcia, the Vice President of Community Impact for Fulfil NJ.
Woo! Janelle, thank you so much for joining us today. We know your schedule is crazy, so we're very appreciative that you are here to talk to us.
Oh, anytime for you all.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what your organization is?
Sure. So Fulfil is actually the food bank for Monmouth and Ocean counties. And in fact, it's a relatively newer name. We were formerly known as the Food Bank of Monmouth and Ocean counties properly. So the name change to Fulfil was meant to encompass the much larger breadth of the issue of being food insecure. So at Fulfil, as a food bank, a lot of people kind of get the terms food bank and food pantry mixed up a bit. So a food bank is the emergency feeding organization that provides food to local food pantries. So we're able to get contracts with the federal government, the state government. We have better purchasing power to where we can buy food at a much cheaper rate than maybe a local church who's offering a food pantry can. So we're able to bring all this food together and then connect with those agencies or food pantries, soup kitchens, day programs, group home shelters that are seeing individuals in our communities that are in need of consistent, nutritious food. So we are kind of that food hub within Monmouth and Ocean counties. Mm-hmm. And again, we recognize that food is more than just being hungry, right? It also matters about the nutrition of food. Mm-hmm. So we make sure that when we are purchasing food, that we are putting an emphasis on buying foods that are more expensive at the grocery store, but also more beneficial to your health. So that includes buying protein, produce, and dairy products and making sure that our agencies within the community have access to those foods for their community members. Again, it's more than just being hungry. Mm-hmm. So we also offer some resource services, such as helping community members sign up for SNAP, which is the program formerly known as food stamps, or people still use that terminology. We also help community members sign up for health care, because a lot of times if you're food insecure, you're having to make some financial choices. And so a lot of times people might be struggling with a health condition. And they're having to decide, like, I'm going to pay for my prescription this month, so I can't buy this food. And we know that food is very much connected to their health. So we want to make sure that we can help them get on health insurance so that that can help mitigate some of those costs associated with whatever health condition they may have. And then we also send out referrals to our community partners who offer additional services like housing help, utilities assistance, things like that.
That's amazing.
Where do you guys get your food from?
Sure. So we actually purchased the vast majority of it. Pre-pandemic, we actually used to get most of our food from the federal government. So there's the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or it's called TFAP is the acronym. We use lots of acronyms in food banking. Mm-hmm. So that's where we would get the bulk of our food, is the government would allocate food purchased through the federal government to food banks within the country, actually. And a lot of it's based on your service numbers. So how many people are you serving? So this is how much food the government's going to set aside for you. There's a similar program in the state of New Jersey called the State Food Program, or SFPP. And so it's another kind of jumble of food that we're able to purchase and then get it out to our agencies. So that's one way. So a lot of that, that's kind of quote unquote free to us in a way. But unfortunately, since the pandemic, that food is less and less available. So we're seeing less food allocated to us. There could be a myriad of reasons to that. Probably a lot of it is just food availability. You guys might remember during the pandemic, the grocery store shelves weren't as full as they typically were. You could get certain items, you couldn't get certain items. We're still feeling that pressure now as a food bank. So we're getting less and less from the government, which means we're having to buy more and more. And food is more expensive even for us. So we're purchasing the vast majority of our food. And then we do also have relationships with food retailers who are generous enough to donate food to us, which allows us to distribute it to our agencies.
So you kind of already touched on this, but out of the resources that you have and programs that Fulfil offers, which one is the most used or popular?
Oh boy. Well, I would say the most used kind of resource as a food bank we have are our agencies within the community. So our community members who are struggling with food insecurity are accessing our food pantries, our soup kitchens, our day programs, group homes, as well as shelters. So that's wonderful, but we also know for every person that's walking into one of those agencies for food, there's a whole bunch more that are not. And so we're trying to figure out as a food bank, how do we break down those barriers that are preventing the people who aren't coming in? What is stopping them from doing that? Is it not the right food for their culture? Is it lack of awareness? Is it hours that agency's operating? Do we need more after hours? Do we need them to be open during the weekend? So there's a lot that kind of goes into it to figure it out. But, our agencies are definitely doing the bulk of the work for us, but we know that we could be providing access more efficiently in other ways. It's just figuring out what is that thing that's preventing somebody from walking in. I think we work really hard understanding, again, that food insecurity is very multifactorial, meaning that there's a lot of other things that go into it than just being hungry. So we are really trying to help people with other aspects of their life that they might need help with, like getting food stamps so that they can actually walk into a grocery store and buy the things that they want and they need. There's dignity to that. So as wonderful as it is to walk into a food pantry and pick out the food that's on the shelves, that food is limited. Again, we're limited on what we're getting from the government. We're limited on what we can buy. So it's not like they're walking in and they have, everything at their disposal. That's just not the case, unfortunately. So we want to make sure that we're offering culturally sensitive items to them. And it can be tough, but our pantries do, again, all the heavy lifting on that. But offering something like food stamps as a supplement allows them to, again, get the food that they want and need to bring home to their families. So we really have to market that better and get the word out.
How do you guys find out what those barriers are?
So we have to ask. And I think that it can be really easy to assume, right? Like what the problems are. So I can make a whole bunch of guesses, like why people aren't going to our pantries or why people don't want to sign up for SNAP. I can make a lot of assumptions, but the reality is it's not my lived experience. And so we make it a point to make sure that we are talking with our community. We're talking to our agency leaders. We're not there for the day-to-day activities within these spaces. So to be able to get that anecdotal evidence from them, to hear what their clients are saying, the different types of people that they're seeing come into their space. Are they speaking English? Are they not? If they're not, how can we speak their language so that we can make sure that they understand everything that is available to them? So yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting time for us, and we're really trying to meet the need of a lot of people that we don't really understand yet. So there's surveys that we can offer. Fortunately, they're offered in multiple languages, which is really important. I'm sure you guys have probably been asked to fill out a survey, or you might get those robocalls and you just want to hang up immediately. So we recognize that we're taking people's time. We're asking them to do us a favor. So we work on actually incentivizing them to participate in these types of surveys, because they really are helping us help them. But it should come at a cost. Their time is valuable, and we don't want to take away from that. So surveys are big for us, and making sure you're using validated surveys that are asking the questions the way they need to be asked, so you can get the answer that you need to solve the problem, is really critical. So we have to invest on that on our end, and then we use that data to help guide us and figure out, how do we fix a problem, or how do we provide a service that's actually needed versus what we think might be needed.
So you guys work with all of Monmouth and Ocean County. Do you guys find that there are specific areas that need more than others?
There's definitely what we would call higher need areas for sure in both counties. It's interesting because, again, post pandemic, there was a lot of shifting and movement in the population. And so even now, we're trying to get a handle on where people are at now. Also, what we've seen in the last year alone is that there's been a huge influx of refugees and immigrants from multiple countries that speak multiple languages. And we're trying to figure out, where are they settling? Again, are we offering culturally appropriate food? Are we speaking their language so we can even market to them that these resources are available? So the answer is, like, there's some obvious areas, but again, we can't pretend like those are the only ones just because we know that that was true one time before. We're really taking a deep dive right now to do kind of an environmental scan to really understand the population as it is today versus what it was a few years ago.
How do people find your resources? Like, how do you guys get the word out? Like, do you
Yeah.
guys have social medias?
We do have social media, but what we find is that our neighbors that really need our assistance don't necessarily access information from the traditional social media, right? It's a great place for us to reach out to potential volunteers like you all who are in this room, as well as for donors, because what we do, again, does come at a cost. We're buying more and more of our food, so we really need the financial contributions of our community to help us help others. So that's part of the surveying aspect and really talking to our clients and our agency leaders to see, like, what is the best way for us to market what we do. So a lot of it ends up being word of mouth, especially for people that are newer to our country and aren't really sure how to navigate things. If we are able to successfully work with a neighbor of theirs who can then share their positive experience and give them the rundown of how this works, they're more likely to feel comfortable to come in and get assistance themselves, and then it kind of snowballs from there, which is wonderful. So that's why it's so important that everybody's treated with care and dignity when they walk into any of our spaces, because we want them to feel comfortable and tell their friends who need help. Other ways is through bulletins. We also have a texting service where people can text a number and text in their zip code, and they can see all the different agencies that are available and the days and times that they have availability to pick up food. So that's another great platform for people to use. Newspapers, things like that. We're actually having to go kind of old school on how we're getting the word out there, because, again, we're finding that especially people are newer to our country, they're not accessing social media the way that our past customers were, our past clients were.
Do you guys have locations all throughout New Jersey?
So Fulfil only services Monmouth and Ocean counties, but New Jersey has 5 food banks in total. And we all actually work together because people move a lot, right?
Yeah.
So especially when we see this kind of surge in the immigrant populations, they're not just coming to Monmouth and Ocean counties, they're going all over the state of New Jersey. So we're able to work together to kind of understand, like, where are some areas that are seeing high need, and how can we share our resources to support one another and kind of come up with a goal as a state versus a goal as a singular food bank, because we're seeing a lot of the similar things. We're having the same purchasing issues, things like that. So it's always better to kind of put our heads together and kind of come up with a solution than just one at a time.
Yeah. You kind of touched on this earlier too, but like we said in our earlier statistic that Black and brown people are disproportionately affected by food insecurity. How do you help combat that?
Sure. Well, I think it's important that anytime that you're offering food to individuals, that you're offering it to a space where people are naturally already going, right? So that's part of decreasing barriers. Let's not make it harder for somebody to get the help that they need. So we like to invest our time and energy into working with agencies that, again, are already a part of that community. So the majority of our agencies are actually faith-based. And most people, that live in communities, there's a spiritual aspect to that. And lots of times religious organizations are also known to be trusted within their communities. And so people feel more comfortable in accessing those services. So that's kind of one way. Again, the other way is to make sure that Our Black and Brown clients, our Black and Brown agency leaders are at the table when we make decisions. So we want to know, again, from a lived experience perspective, from a cultural perspective, are we meeting the need? I am one brown person out of a community of brown people, so I can't even pretend to know, because like I'm the token, person at the table in terms of a leadership role at my organization. I can't pretend like I have the answers for an entire community. I'm one voice in a community, but I again like to really make sure that we're dipping into those places and spaces where those neighbors can say exactly what it is they want and need, and it's not up to me to make that decision for them.
So what exactly is your role at Fulfil?
I ask myself that question every single day. So I've actually only been in my role for 1 year. In fact, today is my 1 year anniversary. So yeah, thank you so much. So I'm excited to get to celebrate it with you all. So I am the Vice President of Community Impact at Fulfil. It was actually a new role that was created, and so I'm like the inaugural member of that. So I am responsible for all external facing programming for the food bank. So again, the food bank really, it's a major goal of it is to bring food in, but then we have to figure out how do we get the food out, right? That's just as important as bringing it in. Are we putting it into the right places? So I'm responsible for several different departments within the organization, one in which is our network engagement team. So they're responsible for interfacing with all of our agencies within the community. So again, our pantries, our soup kitchens, group home shelters, day programs, things like that. So they meet with people in the community. We make those connections with those agencies. We have them sign membership agreements, and then we help them get food into their space, help them organize it, build capacity so that we're decreasing barriers and helping as many people as possible. So that's kind of the network engagement team's job. I also have a culinary team that does food production. Yep. So they help to make food for after school programs, for example, or senior programs, our summer food service program that's offered in a lot of schools within Monmouth and Ocean counties. So they do a lot of meal production, but then they also have a workforce program. So they have a 13-week culinary training program where we actually invite community members in to learn culinary skills. They end up with all the certifications they need to work in a kitchen afterwards. And the goal is that when they graduate from us, they get a 1-week externship that hopefully they can get hired on, and they have a trade that they can use to make a living moving forward. So that's the culinary team. I also have a garden team. They help to put in gardens at schools as well as in the community. And so the goal is that we're creating an environment of sustainability. So again, produce can be kind of expensive, it's perishable, it doesn't have a long shelf life. So we want to make sure that we can get as much of it into the community as possible, and that's what the garden program does. They help set up community gardens where all the produce that's harvested can go back into our network and feed the people who are in need. We also have a community health department, and they're really responsible for connecting us with schools and healthcare organizations and providing a lot of really important nutrition education to our clients to make sure that the food that they have, they're actually able to use and they enjoy it. There's a component to that. I am forgetting somebody. Oh, our Resource Connections team, the last one. I've already kind of talked about them. So they help with a lot of the benefits assistance. So signing people up for SNAP, signing people up for healthcare, utilities assistance, prescription assistance, all that good stuff. That, again, hopefully the goal is to help people get out of the line. You'll hear us say that a lot. We want to empower them to get additional help that they need, kind of hopefully bring more money into their pocket because they're getting help from these other services and programs that they can then purchase food or pay their rent or pay their bills on time and, hopefully help them get back on track.
What does SNAPS mean again?
SNAP is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So it's formerly the food stamp program. People still use that terminology, but there's a lot of bias associated with that. So SNAP is the term that we like to use, and it's income based, so it's also household size based. So you have to apply for it and recertify for it annually. There are some special criteria if you're a senior or if you're somebody with a disability. There's a little more paperwork associated with that, but you're able to essentially get money to buy, again, food in a local grocery store or convenience store as you wish. Every single month, you get a little debit card and they refill it, and you can go grocery shopping like any of us would do.
So, what does your typical day look like?
It's so different every day. Oh gosh, lots of meetings. Lots of meetings. I think it sounds like a great idea to be in charge and to have a job title like vice president, but the reality is it kind of takes you out of the field. And that can be tough for somebody that's a doer like I am. Like, I like to be on the ground and getting my hands dirty and kind of coming up with the solutions as the problems come up, and really like being with, the people that we're serving. But the reality is that there's so much that has to happen above board to make sure that, processes are running efficiently, and that we're putting in grain applications and submitting the right reports. So unfortunately, a lot of my day is spent doing that. And I'm lucky because I have a really talented team that is working on the ground, doing the day-to-day things, bringing those high-level problems to me so that I can help solve them and make their jobs a little bit easier. So today, for example, I started my day at 9 a.m. With a planning meeting with the other food banks, because every year we put on a conference for all of our agencies within the state to come and network with one another and learn about what's going on and to come up with solutions. So that's how it started. Now I'm here. And I have to go back, and I have some other meetings that are more internal, involved with some solutioning to issues that have popped up. Meeting one-on-one with my team to make sure that you kind of know what's going on in their week, and I can help solve any problems that they foresee are coming up. And also, it's an opportunity for me to get to know them and help them expand their skill set for their career, because I'm not so naive to think that they're going to work for me forever, even though I want them to. I want them to be able to get a job that they're dreaming of. Like, if they want to be the vice president of something one day, I want to help them get there. So that's also a part of my day. So it's well beyond food banking. It ends up being about people, even the people that I work with a lot. It's a very people-based job. And I love it. And I'm 1 year in, and I'm here with you guys.
At Fulfil, your mission is to accelerate food security. What would you say has been your biggest contribution to that?
Oh, I'm going to be really modest and say I don't feel like I've done anything. It's only been a year. I mean, I think that I've learned so many lessons in this last year about how it all works. There's a lot of governmental things that I had to learn very quickly so that we can continue to get the food to feed the people. I have so much more work to do, but in this coming year, we're planning on doing a lot of surveying, and I'm really excited about that because, again, we're going to be able to really, truly understand the needs of the people who are walking into our doors, and that's of the utmost importance because that will dictate then how we bring in food and get it out, and the types of food that we're bringing in and putting out. So I'm most excited about that. I think that's going to definitely have the biggest impact for us. And I'm excited. Yeah, I think that it's time, and I'm happy to be the one to kind of usher that in right now.
You said that you're a doer. So what was your role at Fulfil before you became the vice president?
So I actually moved here from Florida.
Oh my goodness.
I know. I know. Everybody gives me the look you all just gave me. For the listeners, it was wide eyes. Yeah. So I actually started my career at a children's hospital in St. Petersburg, Florida. Yeah. And I actually am a trained researcher. I have a PhD in health and human performance. So my plan was I was very exercise focused and nutrition focused. So I did a lot of nutrition education programming and evaluation. And that kind of led into different jobs throughout a 9-year span at that children's hospital. I really started focusing on community health and accidentally got into giving people food. Yeah, so it was after a hurricane, because again, you live in Florida, you have hurricanes, and we were introduced to the food bank in Florida that serviced that area, and they taught us a lot about what food insecurity meant. It was not on our radar at all, and it kind of, I don't know, it planted a seed in my brain, and it never left me. So I actually started a bunch of food pantries in St. Petersburg at local high schools. As well as started some food pantries on campus at the hospital after much insistence on my part. And then it kind of got to the point where I felt like, oh, I think I want to do more and do something different. I've been here for a while. So I actually went and worked in higher education. I went and worked for the University of Florida. And I worked as the associate director of their student health promotion programming, which was awesome. But again, I was too far away from my passion, and that seed was really starting to grow. And I really wanted to get back to working in the food security space. And so here I am, a year later, still in New Jersey. So it's been a learning curve. I'm happy it hasn't snowed yet. But yeah, it was really a seed planted many years ago, just after a hurricane, and it's now become my career and my passion.
I feel like all your jobs are kind of like puzzle pieces. Like they all fit up together, like leading up to where you are.
Yeah, and it's all accidental. And I think as young people, the thing that I would like to incite to you is that it's great to have a plan and it's great to have a vision, but be open to what the universe has to offer you, because you never know where it's going to take you, and it's okay to change your mind. You don't have to do what you said you were going to do today. You can definitely change your mind, and I certainly feel as if I'm where I'm supposed to be.
It's really cool to see your journey. Right.
It's a whole other thing to experience.
Yeah, you started like so well, like the children's hospital, and then you've done so much.
Yeah, and there's nothing to say that I'll continue working in a food bank. I mean, I love my job. If my boss is listening to this, like, we're all good. But I think more than that is that I'm open to this experience and learning from it and learning new skills and new information, and it most certainly can be extrapolated to another place in space. We'll just see what that looks like and when that happens.
It's really cool.
So inspirational.
How do we continue to accelerate food security?
Oh, boy. Well, I think, again, getting the word out of how people can receive help is most important, and really reducing that stigma. It can be hard to ask for help, even when we're talking about a basic human necessity, right? Food, we all have to have food to survive. So I think reducing the stigma, reducing barriers, improving access, really understanding our neighbors' needs is critical. And again, as a food bank, that is what we're working towards. But as a community, we can all be working together in that effort, especially when we see such a big influx of new neighbors coming in from different countries and different experiences and walks of life. It's important for us to share information with one another so that we can together come up with a solution, because it's hunger, unfortunately, and food insecurity isn't something that we as Fulfil, as a food bank, can solve. There's so many other aspects to it, as I've mentioned during our conversation. So really working together with our other community organizations and, putting our assets together and our resources together to make sure that when one person walks into any of our doors, we're able to point them in all the directions of help that they may need, with the goal of empowering them in such a way that they're not going to need any of us in 6 months from now or a year from now. If anything, they're going to walk back through our doors as a volunteer and be able to give a testimony of how great this experience was, and how they can help navigate their neighbors who might be in similar situations. Like, that's the goal. So it takes a lot of us to get there. It takes all of us. So we're really working towards a collective impact approach, and that is a actual model that we use to target these really big societal issues. Again, understanding it's not a one thing we fix and it's all better. There's so many things that have to align for a person to be able to sustain their life. And so we bring all those partners together to try to make that happen.
Wow, just them.
Yeah.
It's a lot, yeah.
Yeah. What would you say has been a major challenge for Fulfil?
I think, again, the fact that we went from purchasing like maybe a third to a quarter of our food to now purchasing almost 2/3 of our food. So millions of dollars we're having to raise to then spend on purchasing food, because there's less and less available to us from the government. as well as even donations from retailers. You know, as we said, you know, the pandemic, we saw things weren't on the shelves. Even now, like, you remember the egg crisis of last year? There was no eggs anywhere. Yeah. All these things still happen. Yeah, it's like the most random things. Like, there were no sweet potatoes, like, in the fall. We couldn't find sweet potatoes, and it's, like, going to be Thanksgiving, and everybody wants sweet potato casserole, and we can't find them. It gets really wild. Like, that's been a big part of what I've learned is about food purchasing and sourcing and where food comes from and its availability and how far in advance we have to think about those things so that we have them on hand at enough time for a special event like Thanksgiving. So, for example, just like a fun Thanksgiving note, we purchased 17,000 turkeys last year to give out to our neighbors in Monmouth and Ocean County. We will be purchasing for 2024, we'll be purchasing turkeys next month.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Just to make sure that we can get them. And so we're having to do that well in advance.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, just to make sure that they're available.
How do you guys gain like what was the word I was gonna use? How do you guys even come back to it? I can't think of the word. Like, how do you guys raise the money to?
Yeah, we have a development team. So our development team, they're made up of fundraisers. So we work with just like individual donors. So if you've ever donated to Fulfil before, you're going to be getting something in the mail from us saying like, hey, please continue your annual giving. So we do that. We work also with like companies. So trying to work with, other like profit organizations and things like that who are looking for a way to philanthropically spend their money. We look to people who are well off. We also do events. We do fundraising events. Last year we had a concert, a Jersey Shore kind of concert that we hosted to raise money. So those are kind of the ways that we actively try to raise money. But then we have to write a lot of grants, lots and lots of grants. And some of them are really big grants through the state or through the federal government, and others are through a foundation, through a company. They have foundations, and, we apply for money for that. Sometimes it's our local government that we're writing grants for. So we're either trying to raise money, incite people to donate money, or we're trying to receive money through grant funds. So those are kind of the few different pathways in which we raise.
So how can high school students like us help the battle of food insecurity?
Well, I think you guys are doing a huge service just in this podcast, right? Just knowing about it, teaching your peers about it. In my experience, especially working with high schoolers, a lot of the feedback I would get from school administration when I would try to start a food pantry, for example, in a high need school would be, well, nobody's going to go to that. Like, people are just going to pick on each other, and this is just going to be a problem. And so my strategy was always, well, why don't we not make this like a dirty secret? And why don't we have the students be a part of the solution? Like, let's have them own this project. There's so many valuable things to get out of it. Not only do you learn about a really important social issue, you also start to learn about the solutions to that. And you guys, let's face it, are much brighter than me. Your minds are much fresher. So I love to hear your ideas. Again, the word of mouth piece is huge. You guys are a massive social network. So you guys are able to get information out there quite efficiently in ways that I can't even think of right now. And you guys are the future. You're going to be my boss one day. And so just being able to get quality information out there and to get you all involved, because part of it is hearing, but also another part of it is doing. Come and volunteer at Fulfil, volunteer at a local food pantry or soup kitchen, start a food drive at your school, or even better, help me help you start a food pantry. Because in that, again, there's a lot of soft skills you guys can learn that you can put on your resume. You can learn how to do inventory and intakes and people skills and, just the social service aspect of it, obviously. But there's a lot of benefit to it. Math skills, science skills. We can do nutrition education. Like, kind of the sky's the limit. But I think that the more we can involve young people in understanding the issue and then coming up with the solution for the issue, it just makes it better for all of us, right? So I think it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, right? It's kind of what everybody's comfortable with. But I think first and foremost, getting the information out like you're doing right now, and then figuring out what could we do here on the ground, what's feasible, and how can we as Fulfil help you do that, because we are ready, willing, and able. You guys ready to open a food pantry is what I'm seeing? Yes. Teachers, yes.
Seriously thinking about it, the wheels are turning.
Yeah, and and that's what my team and I are meant to do. Obviously, we do it in the community with our faith-based organizations and other community organizations, but the reality is that why shouldn't it be available in schools? You guys spend more waking hours here at school than you do at home or anywhere else during the school year. So why shouldn't we be offering you sustainable, nutritious food right down the hall from where you take English? Yeah. Right? And there's probably plenty of faculty and other staff members here that also might need some help. Why should we make it harder that they have to then find an agency within the community that's available when they get out of school? We can offer that to you guys here. And even a beautiful garden where you can pop the lettuce out on your own.
Do we have a garden?
I think we do. We do have one here and at another elementary school.
So, what advice would you give us students here at the School of Social Justice?
Oh gosh, in
Besides
terms of how to solve hunger?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
or any advice?
Just advice.
Any
in
advice?
general.
I would say
about solving
start
hunger.
having a conversation. Again, I think this is a big part of it. It's like bringing in people right with the knowledge of it, and then as the boots on the ground, the experts at your school, like start mobilizing your effort. Start thinking about like what role could we play in helping our immediate neighbors in our high school. How can we help solve this problem for them? Because even though this may seem very small and like, oh, we're one high school, well, you're one high school that could really change the path of another student. And I'll just give you a little story from a past school that I worked with. Again, like when you work in leadership, you kind of miss the day-to-day stuff. You don't necessarily see the initial impact of things or the immediate impact of things. And so I had been working with the school in St. Petersburg for a year or two. They'd had a pantry. And it, thank goodness, was successful. And I had gone back to the school. It was right after the summer. Teachers were doing their kind of preschool workshops and trainings. And they asked me to come in to just kind of give literally a 5-minute rundown of food insecurity and, to pitch the pantry that we had there and how teachers could help. So I do it. I'm getting ready to leave. The principal stops and she was like, oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever told you this story. The year prior, there was a senior student. It was actually around this time, right after the holiday break, that the student stopped going to school. And they were on track to graduate. And school was reaching out, couldn't find them. A friend of his was aware of the pantry and initiated a conversation with one of the teachers that helps at the pantry and says, so-and-so got kicked out of his house. He's living in a stairwell. He can't come to school because he doesn't have any clothes, like he can't wash his clothes and he can't get food. So I don't know what to do. So she's like, how about this? I will come into the pantry. Let's get some food for him. You can come back as often as you need to get food for him, but tell him to come back and talk to us. That happens. Student comes back. Student's able to kind of get back on track and ends up graduating on time. And the anecdote that he was able to give the teachers working in the pantry was, if my friend hadn't have come to you and hadn't have brought me that first bag of food, I wouldn't be here today with the diploma in my hand. I had no hope. And what you were able to give me was my life back from one bag of food. And of course that turned into multiple bags of food afterwards, but he didn't have the most necessary thing to be successful. And that pantry was able to provide him with that, but his friend was able to reach out and get the help that he needed. And it was there, thank goodness. Otherwise, that student definitely, he wouldn't have been able to finish because he didn't have those basic needs met. So I think it can have such massive impact, I think, is kind of what I'm trying to get at in the story. And that was something I found out about months later. And it happens every single day, and you just don't realize it. And these stories, unfortunately, they're not uncommon. We just don't know because, the opportunity isn't there to learn.
Wow.
I know. It's sorry. I didn't mean to bring it down. It's an upper.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting the impact it can have. Sometimes you don't know it immediately. Doesn't mean it's not there.
I love that.
I think that shows how we need to be more grateful of what we have, because some people don't have what we have. I think that's just like a story like that just makes me think about what I have, and that I need to cherish that more.
Yeah. And what's crazier is that I think when we think about food insecurity, we think like this person's homeless, they have nothing, like they can barely put clothes on, every day, like they have nothing. And the reality is that there's many households that they're living paycheck to paycheck. Like they're one illness away from needing to come to our food pantry. They're one missed child support check away from needing to come into our food pantry. So there's plenty of people who are, working people, maybe working multiple jobs, that it's still just not enough to get them all that they need. Yeah. So as much as it can be something as drastic as the story that I told, like a homeless student, the reality is there's plenty of other students that you would never realize, and it can change so quickly. So food insecurity may seem like it's this like long-term issue that a person can struggle with. It certainly can be, but it's also very dynamic. You can be food insecure this month because your car broke down and you got the flu and you missed a week of work, or it could be you lost your job and you don't have a paycheck for several months. Yeah. It can really change on a dime for people. And you can get out of it, just as easily for those that maybe it's I was sick for a week, I didn't get my paycheck, and I just got to get caught up, So it's not necessarily like you're food insecure, you're going to be food insecure for at least a year. That is certainly the case, but not for everybody. So that's what I also like for people to know, that you might have somebody come to a pantry one time because that's all they needed, and that's okay. But you also might have somebody who needs to come every single week.
This is why we are so grateful to have you in Monmouth County.
Because I feel like this is such a good thing, because like if you hadn't come in today, like I would be like really unaware of that. Like,
yeah,
I wouldn't really, well, I don't want to sound rude, like I wouldn't really think about that, you know what I mean? Like I'm aware of like pantries, but not like necessarily the people that go.
You always know like the basic frontier of like what a pantry is, and like, oh, you can get food, but there's so
like,
much
of
more.
How really impactful it
is. Well, and I think too, even there's a misconception of what a food pantry is. So a lot of people think it's like a little mini grocery store. You just walk in and get what you need and you go. And the reality is that they can't be that, because a lot of the places aren't big enough to hold that much inventory. And then also, again, as I mentioned, like it's hard for us to get a wide variety of food sometimes. And so food pantries are really meant to be supplemental. So it's not meant to be a person's entire diet, right? It's not meant to be the sole source of where they're getting food. But unfortunately for a lot of neighbors, it is. And so it's not, unfortunately, good enough for some people to just go to one food pantry. They're having to go to multiple food pantries throughout the week. They're visiting 2-3 pantries in a week just to make sure they have an adequate amount of food for their family. Yeah. And even a variety, because people deserve that. So, they're having to spend their time and resources going to multiple places to get food. And it can be really tough, especially for a lot of our agencies. Most of our agencies are volunteer run. And so they feel a lot of guilt, like, oh, we don't have enough stuff on the shelves. We don't have, we ran out of this or we ran out of that. And it's hard because it's like they're seeing these people come in and they need help. And the reality is like this is only meant to be supplemental, because that's all we have the capacity for. Like we have to find other ways to support them, which is where SNAP comes in. Yeah. You get them the ability to purchase food on their own from the grocery store. So it's complicated, I think is what you guys are learning and what you're seeing. And that's why having multiple avenues of where people can access food is really important, and making sure that they understand the resources that are available to them to help them not have to necessarily go to a food pantry, 3 different food pantries in a week.
It's genuinely been an honor to have this conversation with you. Janelle, thank you again so much for joining us here today on Social with the Side of Justice.
We hope you enjoyed dining with us today. And here is your guest check.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.